Welcome back to the story of the Sega Game Gear. If you missed part 1, we discussed how Sega built a technological marvel only to doom it with 6 AA batteries and a 3-hour lifespan. You can catch up on the tragic specs and battery war with the Game Boy before diving back in. Now that we understand the hardware's crippling logistical problem, it's time to talk about the games. Let's dive into the fantastic, action-packed library that made the Game Gear a cult classic, despite its flaws. Now, let's talk about the soul of any console, the game library. Sega's biggest initial advantage was its existing library. Since the Game Gear was an enhanced master system, it was relatively easy and cost-effective to port games over, giving it a solid launch catalog right out of the gate. This led to some incredible console-quality experiences on the go. Titles like Sonic the Hedgehog specifically, the excellent Sonic Chaos and Triple Trouble, Shinobi and Streets of Rage felt like genuine, scaled-down, colorized versions of their 16-bit console brethren. The color made the difference, allowing for detailed sprites and complex backgrounds that the Game Boy could only dream of. Unlike the Game Boy, which dominated the puzzle and RPG genres thanks to games like Tetris and Final Fantasy Adventure, the Game Gear became the handheld of choice for action, fighting, and platforming fans. If you wanted the Mortal Kombat experience with actual blood and clear visual detail, the Game Gear delivered. Other notable, visually stunning titles included the fast-paced racer Road Rash, a technical masterpiece of pseudo-3D on 8-bit hardware, and Micro Machines, which utilized the landscape screen format perfectly for its top-down racing chaos. However, this reliance on ports was also a weakness that became obvious over time. Many titles were simply shrunken-down Master System games, and the Game Gear's wide, landscape screen format meant that some games felt cramped or lacked the necessary vertical scrolling space that the Master System's squarer aspect ratio had provided. One key differentiator that appealed to hardcore fans was the Master Gear converter. This massive, slightly ridiculous peripheral plugged into the cartridge slot and allowed the Game Gear to play original Sega Master System cartridges. This essentially made the Game Gear a fully backward-compatible, portable Master System. A technical triumph, but again, another bulky add-on, reinforcing the idea that this was a mobile command center, not a pocket companion. Ultimately, the Game Gear struggled profoundly with third-party support compared to the Game Boy. Developers preferred the massive, guaranteed install base and the simplified, low-spec development pipeline of Nintendo's system. While the Game Gear amassed roughly 300 game releases over its lifespan, the Game Boy had nearly twice that amount, including many system-defining exclusive games. But those few hundred Game Gear games were often visually stunning and stand out today as a highlight of 8-bit color gaming. The Game Gear proved that power and ambition could lead to exceptional titles, even if the logistics of running and playing them were challenging. Despite its technical edge, the Game Gear had a ticking clock on its life. The lack of true portability, the crippling high operational cost, and the general strategic confusion in Sega's approach all contributed to its eventual defeat. By the mid-90s, the handheld battle was effectively over. Nintendo reinforced its dominance with the release of the Game Boy Pocket in 1996, which was dramatically slimmer, lighter, and fixed the original's contrast issues, while still maintaining that incredible multi-day battery life. Sega officially discontinued the Game Gear in 1997. They tried a couple of Hail Mary passes with other portable devices, most notably the short-lived, much more powerful Genesis Nomad, which attempted to put the 16-bit console in your hands. But the Nomad failed for the exact same reasons. The lessons of the Game Gear, that raw power means poor battery life and poor sales, were hard for Sega to internalize. The final nail in the coffin, though completely unrelated to batteries, was an insidious, widespread technical flaw: the capacitors. Nearly every Game Gear manufactured suffered from failing electrolytic capacitors due to age and heat. This common defect caused the screen to dim and darken, the sound to fail completely, and eventually rendered the units unusable. If you pick up an original Game Gear today and it doesn't work, it's not because the hardware is complex. It's almost certainly the capacitors. This fatal manufacturing flaw cemented its reputation as fragile and unreliable, turning what was once an expensive piece of tech into a non-functional doorstop for countless consumers. But the story doesn't end there. In the decades since, the Game Gear has made a surprising evolution from a commercial failure into a beloved piece of hardware for retro enthusiasts and modders. Modern modifications, specifically the installation of bright, energy-efficient IPS screens and battery-efficient power regulators, have solved the dual problem of the dim display and the crippling battery drain. Today, you can easily play the entire Game Gear library on the portable system Sega always meant to build. The Game Gear left a powerful, if indirect, legacy. It fundamentally proved to the entire industry that gamers wanted and expected a color handheld experience, setting the stage for future successful color systems from competitors, and eventually forcing the release of the Game Boy Color itself in 1998. It was the first handheld that truly felt like a home console experience on the go, a bold, beautiful, and ultimately unsustainable vision of the future. It was the handheld designed for the kid who always chose raw power, gorgeous visuals, and uncompromising sound over practicality and longevity. In the end, the Game Gear was a console defined by its own overreach. It failed precisely because it was too good. It was too power-hungry, too expensive to operate, and too focused on winning a technical spec war it didn't need to fight, when the practical battle for portability was already won by Nintendo. But fire up Sonic Chaos or Power Rangers, the movie on a modern recapped unit with that bright IPS display, and you instantly understand the magic it offered. This was the color handheld dream of 1991, realized 30 years too early.
So, what was your Game Gear killer app? Did you own the TV tuner? And if so, how fast did it kill your AAs? Did you constantly have a 12-pack of Duracell AA batteries stashed in your backpack just in case? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Sega's most ambitious, yet most flawed, handheld, please hit that like button and subscribe for more retro tech history. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.